So one thing I will say is a quote that my father instilled on me very early on in my career: 10 years of 1 year experience is still 1 year experience. And so that, I think, really resonated with me early on in my career, is that just because someone says they have 10 years experience, is it 10 years of 1 year experience, or have they really exposed themselves?
Welcome to Own It. Today's episode is all about navigating the ever-changing world of real estate with our guest, Will Wiard, Sides Managing Broker for DC, Maryland, and Virginia, which we lovingly call the DMV. From his early days hustling in the industry at 18 to now leading agents across one of the most diverse real estate markets in the country, Will's got insights that you do not want to miss. I'm Hillary Saunders, joined by my comedic genius co-host, Spencer Kroll.
Yeah, that's so nice of you, Hillary. Now there's a lot of pressure on me, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to do it. Well, our illustrious guest today, Will Wiard, welcome to Own It. You are our magnificent managing broker of the DMV. No, not the Department of Motor Vehicles, but DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So welcome to Own It.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah.
I want to hear your story about just growing up, military family, traveling a bit, and then ending up in DC, and how that has influenced or directed your life story into real estate.
Okay. Where would you like me to begin?
Wherever you
Sure.
feel comfortable beginning.
Yeah. So if you've heard me on any of the things I've spoken about before in terms of early on in my career, got into real estate and got licensed the summer I graduated high school. I got my real estate license at the bright age of 18. I look like I was 12. And,
You look like you're 14 now.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I dressed appropriately, I tried. No, so I got in, and the thing that I love about my ability to get in at the age that I did is technology in our space was not really even introduced. And so I always use this as an example because it resonates, I think, with the older generation of real estate and also the younger generation, in the sense that when I first got in, I was learning on a grid map. I had a thick map that was, based on different quadrants of the state and roads that didn't exist anymore, roads that, weren't there. And then, slowly but surely got a TomTom, for those who know what that is.
Sure, yeah.
And started learning about roads that weren't there and taking me down, places that weren't, because the technology really wasn't there yet. MapQuest was my best friend. But I learned all of those things very early on. But in doing so, I didn't have the ability to use technology as a crutch. And I think in today's ecosystem of agents, there's a group that have only known technology as the solution base for their business. And so it's interesting when I was managing, even our partners now, but also partners and agents that were on two ends of the spectrum, from an age range of 76 down to 17 or 18, in terms of how they approach business. Mm-hmm. And so that, getting in very early on gave me that exposure where I don't think I would have had the same luxuries and understanding if I got in later on when technology was more introduced.
How immature were you at 18, or how?
I'm being
because we're such an outwardly facing business where we're taking other people's needs into consideration. And I know at 18, I didn't give a crap about anybody.
Well, going back, I was in a structured military family growing up, and for me personally, I put 100% behind anything that I'm going to get into. I'm not going to get into it. Yeah. But the one thing that I think really helped me establish myself very early on, and I say this to anybody, is I memorized the sales contract. Line by line, paragraph by paragraph, so that when I went into a negotiation, knowing nothing else, I knew that I was coming in with the playbook, and I knew that I was going to get the terms for my client, and that. So that's when I started getting the wins, and then I started, polishing myself and as becoming, an adult at that age. But I got thrown into the deep end very early, and it was because I was able to approach it from the legality side of understanding the terms of the agreement that really elevated me to, I think, a quicker speed and allowing me to fail fast to then get through and then, make it to get my broker's license.
That's such an interesting point, because I think collectively we all agree that the current system of licensure is completely broken.
Yeah.
And the classes that one takes to become a licensed agent in any jurisdiction has nothing to do with practical application.
Yeah.
But tip and trick to take away for anyone, if you haven't, memorize or at least please read the entire contract from beginning to end a few times so you're very comfortable with what it says. So good takeaway on that one. I do want to learn more about the uniqueness of this particular area of the country, because you have diplomats coming in and out, you have Congress people coming in and out, you've got a very transient, in my mind, buyer and seller population. Is that
I think the transient
true?
people were staying at my hotel last night.
Oh, that's another story.
Yeah.
But no, but seriously, is that a real thing that people deal with?
Nowhere else in the country, for the most part, will you have within a 5-mile radius of any other kind of class of property a house that was built in the 1800s next to a multi-million-dollar brand new townhouse next to, or close to an estate that George Washington could or could not have, stayed on at some point in time. Next, and then you go down and then you're at a vineyard or a farm. And I mean, those are the kinds of different classes of property and, diplomats and the different laws and, FERPA and all that great stuff that you really don't have the exposure with in other parts of the country. So, if you're dropping somebody in, and nothing against Kansas, but you have a pretty standard understanding of what kind of properties are there, different sizes, different price range. But here you have the historic element, you have the celebrity element, you have, expectations from foreign investors and people. So it's such a onion of a market that is exciting, but at the same time, you can really specialize in a multitude of things to either say, I want to just do historic, properties, or I want to do, multifamily, or I want to do, new construction. And that's something that I think is very unique to this market that you don't have in any other market for the most part.
Are rentals a big part of the market here?
I mean, right now, as you see with, not to get too nerdy on it, but the interest rates and everything are really pushing people out of the ability to purchase. So developers understand that. And for the most part, let's use Northern Virginia or DC, as we come into DC, every developer is pretty much building apartments. There's not many condo opportunities being built just because you have control of it financially. And so you're seeing a flip, I think, right now where rates are going up and people are looking at it like, I'd rather just rent. If something breaks, someone will fix it, and I don't have to be tied into a 30-year fixed mortgage or whatever. And I can be mobile. I can be I can jump down to maybe Florida or go up to New York if I don't like it here for a year or two. And I think that's a whole new group that again, because of where we are from a mortgage perspective, it's just pushing people in that direction overall.
That's happening in San Francisco too. That was a headline the other day. Was purchasing of a empty massive office building downtown, and they're going to convert it into apartments because you constantly have people that are coming in for tech jobs. They see if they want to live in the city, decide yay or nay. And
it's funny though, because I talk to a lot of realtors throughout even non-realtors, right? They're licensed but not members. But I talk to them and they're shocked that in New York, and I guess San Francisco now, but in New York and especially in Southern California, that people make a living just as leasing agents because the prices are so high. We just did a lease in New York for a summer rental, $1.2 million I couldn't believe that. But you can do that. The rest of the country, people don't have that leasing culture. Maybe that's changing now with the interest rates. We're going to go, because nothing's on the market. That would be interesting to see if more and more agents get into leasing.
It seems more of the norm, especially with the younger generation, just because they don't have the capital, they don't have the ability. Because in addition to putting down, even if you have a VA or if you have FHA, to put down the payment if you were going to do a traditional conventional, but then what your monthly rate is with PITI, and all that fun stuff, in addition to, the living costs and your utilities. I mean, it's really pushing people to a whole new kind of understanding of ownership.
I think that's something that the media we are doing a poor job of actually explaining. It's not just the rate, it's actually the monthly payment.
Yeah.
So that varies dramatically, especially if you're using low down payment assistance, your monthly payments are always higher, and then you have to pay that additional mortgage insurance on top of it. What are you seeing as far as changes in the market over here on the East Coast with people who are wanting to sell, or are they keeping it and leaving those as rentals too? Because that's another opportunity for landowners.
Yeah, I see, the ability for people to just have their house property managed, keep it, under 4%, rate, let it sunset into whenever that, or take some home, money out and maybe refi, and then buy something else. But for the most part, and something that I think is still relatively new, because everyone still has this hope that on the horizon rates are going to dip and people are going to flip the market, not really understanding that also might cause all of the sales prices to spike. But to that point, I see that as the next kind of thing. Like, why would you give up unless you needed to something where your money is not worth the same as it was when you first bought it, and just keep that asset and let it keep appreciating, and then use it as like your bank in a way, then selling it, and then you're automatically at a double the rate.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the myth, right? Logan Mohtashami, who is the economist over at Housing Wire, said that there was the talk of the silver tsunami coming, right? All these baby boomers are going to sell their houses and downsize. And the reality is that's not happening. People want to stay where they are. And if they need help, physically, then they try and bring in help rather than going to, a smaller assisted living facility.
It's cost effective.
Yeah, right?
And people are really locked in there. And by the way, but the whole refinancing game, though, too, because people were buying homes as investments, like, I will buy this to live off of later. And you can't do that if you can't sell. You can't do that if you can't refi. And maybe a refi at 8% or whatever it is might still be a bargain, perhaps, if you have so much equity in your home that you're just pulling out what you need. But I don't know, the whole game has changed in the past.
It's something I don't even think has really
years.
been talked about yet, too, So, it's something that we, I think, as professionals in our space are keeping an eye on, but that's just an underlying silver wave or what have you that I think is slowly building and going to build up even more momentum as we, go into the next, I guess, election cycle and what have you.
The other thing, too, is as advisors of our clients, right? You can't just look at it as just a salesperson, but you're also an advisor. There are benefits for actually turning them into rental properties to their tax benefits and stuff like that, especially if you're managing them yourself. But managing yourself brings a lot of headaches as well, which unfortunately then lead to legal consequences all the time. So when you're managing I want to talk about being a managing broker at Side, right? So what type of manager were you before coming to Side? And why did you come to Side?
So I've been a traditional broker. So like I said, got into the space at 18, and I went into management right around 26. So I've been a managing broker since I was 26. For those who are curious, I'm 36 now, so over 10 years. And I managed a very traditional, company, one of the biggest privately owned companies in the country. And, again, I was thrown into the deep end, had to kind of like build out, my management style and use the skills that I had, early on in my career to fail quickly and to grow and make it happen. So from that, I had the privilege of, managing one of our, if not the top office for the firm for 5 or 6 years, and moved, to another office and was building that office when I got approached with an opportunity to work for a company that its mission and motivation was to give ownership back to top producing agents and indies in the space. And the one thing that's always resonated with me as a manager, but also someone who sold real estate before going into management, was that's the game. There's so many top producing agents and so many top producing teams that I think are whiteboarded, in terms of, their identity is taken away and their ownership is non-existent, and yet they're the ones that are supporting and leading the charge in that firm. So when I heard that was, the initial push, I said, this is the future. Let's see where this goes. Didn't know anything else other than that. And that for me was enough. And so that's how it all began.
First of all, I find it interesting you were managing an office at 26. Because
we're not going to get into what Spencer is doing at 26.
No, but you make it sound like I was in jail. Yeah. So, but the top producers, or even middle-level producers, had to be older than you were. Did you have trouble with that? Did you have trouble establishing your expertise?
The thing that helped me the most was that I knew the contract.
Yeah, you know what?
And I would have agents come in that were like, this guy looks now 15 from when I looked like I was 13. And they would come in and they would be like, got a problem. Blah, blah, blah. And they start rolling, like just, shooting the, shots at me. I was like, oh, that's paragraph 7, okay, the dates are, oh yeah, no worries. And like, I just, handle like that. And like, oh, okay. And then like a few hours later, someone else would come in and try to do that again. And then, so I handle it with poise. I handle it with, with an understanding, but I didn't have that unless I did the things I did between 18 and 26 to have the confidence and have the understanding. So again, to reiterate, I failed quickly and failed a lot, but I had those early years to do it. So that by the time that I was in that position, I had that experience. I had those things, the elements that exposed me to have those stories and the storylines to then relate to the older, top producers.
And you're so now the part two of the question, right?
Sure.
Was so you answered two of them, but being a managing broker at Side, how is that different than being the office manager that you were previously?
A lot of the principles are the same. We're relationship based. I've always led with the relationship is key, especially with a partner. Just the problems are bigger and different, and I'm sure we could all attest to that. But it's a next level. I mean, it's really something where the foundational elements are the same. People have transactional issues. People have life issues. All of that, but it's just a much higher level conversation to have when certain things pop up. But that's what makes it interesting. That's the part that I love about it, is that I wouldn't know the things that I know just because we wouldn't have the exposure to them unless we were the platform that we had, which I think makes only the company better, but also our representation to our markets better because we have that insight that no other company has in our market because we've been exposed to it and we built it out that way. So that is, I think, another part of our secret sauce when we do bring on partners that they're just like, wow, I didn't know we could do that. And I was like, well, here you go.
Well, and I think it's the experience factor also that sets you apart from other managing brokers in the space, is the calm, cool, and collected kind of take on it. We were, at an event last night, and one of our partners had an issue, and the comment that I got was, it is so nice to have Will on the managing broker because you don't get these calls.
I was going to say, has anyone ever said that? Has anyone ever said that about me? That's what I'm wondering.
No, but it was the.
You're a casual that no was. But,
It is so easy to just pick up the phone and get my blood pressure brought down because this issue that I'm having is so heated and so big in my mind, and Will just talks me right through it and calms me down, and then I go about my day. So how is it being a therapist?
I think that is something that we can all add to our resume if it's not already there. But I think that's also, to your point, that's what makes us who we are. And we've talked about this, and I would say this to anybody. We are an eclectic group of very high-level, professionals. But us together, I mean, we're a force that can be reckoned with. Really, I mean, from a national insight, and we all met people in the space. We know our stuff, and we operate that way. And one of the things that we bring to the table, to that point, is unless I'm sweating, you shouldn't be sweating, and that's it. Really. At the end
and
of
it's
the day.
very muggy in DC.
It's
So
very
that's
muggy.
pretty impressive.
there are two things from that which I think is really cool, and I always tell agents, I always say, well, what if that? I go, well, why don't we worry about what if when that happens? Because a lot of times the client will say, I'm going to sue you, and someone will call me saying, should I call the Department of Real Estate because someone might sue me? I was like, no, why don't you just wait to see what happens? Because that was one conversation that was, being that calming force is so important. You really are like a really calm, chill person. So it seems. I mean, you might go home at night and go, I have no idea. But I don't know what you do at night. But but do you ever find like one comment that I had from an agent was that I was dispassionate? And
I've gotten that too, though.
Yeah, because it's like, well, we know what the problem is. Like, I hear it, but my client, they don't have to worry about that. And I think it's really important for us as agents, or for agents to isolate their clients from the hysteria and the craziness, and I try to isolate the agents from that.
Yeah, something to be said about that, and it's unfortunate that this happens, but a lot of times I found when agents get a win or they have negotiated or talked to something, they want to bring that emotion back to the client. And that's never good. You take the emotion, you call your broker, you call your team lead, you call whoever it is, vent that out with them, if it's good, bad, or whatever, and then go back to the client with the calm. Because that's one of the things that can get spun out of control very quickly, like to your point, is you bring that emotion back to the client, that client then has their own emotion and then the other emotion, and then we have a bigger problem even though we don't have a problem just because the emotions have gone rampant. So that, I think, is something that to be said to anybody in this space, is that you need to take the emotion as the representative of the contract or the client and digest it yourself before you go back to have that conversation.
I think that's part of it, is compartmentalizing, right? That's something that I think we learn early on in either the legal profession, medical, or even real estate. Like, things do get heated. This is a big purchase or sale.
The biggest, yeah.
And it's not just a building, it's a home in most cases. And there's a lot tied to that sense of home. And there's a lot of potential baggage that somebody has tied to that sense of home. And you're right. If you open Pandora's box to the emotional roller coaster, it can go sideways real fast.
And that's the thing, going back to buyer agency, it's hard to put a financial or monetary amount on that emotional element. And you really don't know until you're in it. I mean, we all know this, until you're in that transaction, how much of an emotional element that will have on either yourself, your family, or everyone involved. And so it's hard to gauge that. And that's something that I think really divides the seasoned professionals, even if they're only a few years in, but they have that understanding versus somebody who doesn't and then continues to bring it transactionally into the space.
Yeah, just because you've been in the business a long time, this is such a sad comment, but just because you've been in the business a long time doesn't mean you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And that was kind of the big shock, because if you were a doctor or an attorney, generally, like, if you're not figuring it out, you're being disbarred, or you're, or you're not allowed to see patients anymore. It's like, why don't you do the paperwork? And so, as an agent, you can kind of hide, or at least you used to. I think you would. All right. I think that people could hide as buyers agents a little bit.
Oh, just because you're not really providing any value during the transaction, or you're skating through?
You're skating through because well, how do you get your clients, right? Because and I want to pivot into this. How do you get your clients? Well, I happened to be at the open house, and they thought I was nice, and so I got their number and I started showing them around, or maybe you get a referral or something like that. Listing agents have to go and convince, because they're usually up against 2 or 3 other agents, so they have to convince the seller to work with them. And so with buyer's agents, I think it's possible they could. I used to talk about my customer service when I was an agent. And someone said to me, you don't know what good customer service is until you have bad customer service. And so I took that out of the equation. How are you going to be advising people, or how are you advising people now that we're going to have to be asking, or they're going to have to be asking for their own commission from their buyers?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is a quote that my father instilled on me very early on in my career, going to what you were just saying. 10 years of 1 year experience is still 1 year experience.
Oh, interesting.
And so that, I think, really resonated with me early on in my career, is that just because someone says they have 10 years experience, is it 10 years of 1 year experience, or have they really exposed themselves, like the buyer agents that you were referring to, to a more open envelope of transactions and clients?
Before you answer the buyer broker question, I want to get your opinion as to the importance of personal representation, because I don't think that's been talked about enough in this space. Is why is it important for a buyer to have their own representation who is a fiduciary to them and not the seller?
Great question. I believe that we all, especially as brokers in this space already, it's such a benefit to have a second lens on a transaction, on a problem. And that's one thing that we're great about in communicating with each other about things, even nationally. And with that lens, you're able to, and the network that comes with, because there have been cases where, granted, we know how to buy and sell property, but if you throw me in some parts of the country, I don't know anyone there. Sure. I don't know what's the standard price of appraisal there, or what a contractor normally charges. So you need that level of expertise and that local level of expertise and community to really streamline the transaction. And so that's why I've also pushed, if you don't know the market but you know the space, refer it out. Work with that agent that's in that market, and you can still be a part of the conversation, but you're bringing someone in who's a local market expert in their community that is really going to make it a win for you, versus you coming in from X, Y, and Z in this market. But again, it's a different sandbox, and you need that level of I think local influence to really make it happen. So for that, that's where I definitely would recommend getting a buyer agent in that transaction.
I think that's really important, and a lot of people, we haven't done a good job of selling, we as an industry, because someone working in their own market knows those agents, knows market generally, or knows people that know those agents, right? So, hey, how far can I push David before he gets, before he's going to get scrappy with me, or how can I do this, or oh, can you make this phone call for me and let them know that I'm a good guy?
That and also important. We see, I'll use the Virginia market as an example. There might be 50,000 licensees in the state, or whatever it is now. I've seen over the last 20 years the same 200 people.
Yeah.
You see
right.
Some of it changes a little bit. The roster might get updated. It might get smaller because people move and people get out of the industry. But you're pretty much working with the same group. And that's something to be said about our space.
Well, and that's your advantage as a buyer's agent if you're one of those 200 people, right? Because if you're representing a seller, and I think as a buyer's agent you really need to lean on this a little bit more. If you're representing a seller, you're saying, well, I know this agent, I don't know this other agent. Yeah. Right, so, which is part of it, price being equal or terms or whatever.
Yeah. I want to know, before we wrap, what is your goal for the industry, for the DC market in general? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What would be a big win in your book?
To clarify, is that referencing NAR's current settlement? Is that
anything really, because I know one of our pillars at Side has always been to elevate the industry, and I know that every one of our team members has that same goal, but in different veins. So I'm curious what your take on that is.
Again, a great question. I really hope that with a cleanse of some degree, it elevates the industry and kind of snaps the professionalism back into it. Because like anything, you have, to summarize this quickly, you have a lot of people getting in not understanding the true value of themselves or what they represent. And when you do that, it starts diluting the value as a whole. It could be any industry. The one thing I think our industry has had is a big issue with that, because you have different people saying different things. With this, hopefully it will refocus a newfound relationship with representation by the agent, the broker representing the client, and also the client's relationship with the agent. Because again, what kind of I think is unraveled, at least in our market, is, well, I'll sign it when I'm ready, or we could still talk about that. But now that I think it's clear across the country, and again, it's hard because of the media influence to really articulate that in a few sentences, because every state's different. Right. But it needs to, that relationship needs to be at the same level, in my opinion, as attorney-client privilege, and because it's the same emotional element usually that you would have in that space. So I think that is something that I hope that the industry or the DMV really grasps. I also think our partners are the best of what they do, and I hope to bring in more of them, but also more of them and more of the associates to each one of our partners as well, that they're looking for that level of professionalism. So professionalism, community, and then just additional connections within the space that we currently have. So taking where we're at, which is fantastic, within 2 years we've expanded at a great pace and brought on amazing partners, but I think there's plenty of opportunity and room to continue that elevation and growth.
I like what Will just did, because he mentioned 3 main goals, and if you do find a genie bottle and you get 3 wishes, you can knock them all out. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So here we are now in the seat of power of the government. National Association of Realtors, one of the more powerful, or at least one of the largest lobbies in Congress. Where do you see that maybe they can improve where they've fallen down, or I'm just curious what your feelings are in terms of advocacy and.
Yeah, I've had the privilege in my career to sit on the state board and work closely with NAR from that perspective. I sat on the Virginia State Board for 6 years and had the exposure of working with and dealing with a lot of the issues that are outside of the state. And I think that, again, there's a lot of momentum of trying to be competitive in the space with other associations and your memberships, and to continue to grow membership. And I think personally, from my experience, and again, this is just from what I've seen in my exposure, that they lost sight on the membership, and they lost sight on what we are as a labor union for our own members, but also for the members that our members represent in terms of in their local associations and communities. And that's really I think one of the elements of why this issue was brought up, why there's a lot of conversation behind it. because they lost track of that and they look more so for growth and membership and other things that were taking away the focus on, I think, professional standards.
I think one of the things where they really fell down. I mean, I love the code of ethics. I really do, because that is something which you can point to, and it's broken down into so many different cases where you really do have guidance on issues there. So bravo, NAR.
I think that what they've fallen down on is not educating the general public, the buyer seller, as to what services and benefits we as realtors actually provide to them.
Yeah, well, so the campaign, "Who's Your Realtor?" Which went around like who cares? Like, why?
Also,
what is that? What is that? And clear cooperation, to me, is where they really lost. That's where they said, like, "Oh, membership, to hell with you."
It's also hard to put a round peg in a square box of every state is the same, where it's not. Like we were talking about, in some markets the NAR isn't even known because they're not members of an association like that. So you trying to say NAR, National Association, is one size fits all for everybody is not really the case. And so that, again, I think is a lot of the miscommunications on the values that they bring, but also what it is to be a member of that association outside of the code of ethics, and how that elevates and betters the relationship you're supposed to be having with the member and the client.
It would be nice to have it go back to the mission of home ownership.
Yes.
And really advocating for benefiting people to get to be homeowners. And part of this settlement does the quite opposite. It provides the buyers with this massive mountain they have to climb up now, which is doing the opposite of what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Making their lives easier should be our goal for everyone involved.
Yeah. Yeah, just from the lending perspective, right? I mean, now people now are they're not just priced out of the market. They don't have now I have to get a down payment and I have to have money to pay my agent. Yeah. So, it's a difficult thing. So, do you think that being here in DC, as we're all here, do you think NAR is going to be able to pick up the pace, or you think that this is an area where other people can come in and pick up the slack?
I think it's an area, I hate to say it, but I think it's an area where we are in a free market. Nothing's a monopoly. So if someone can get together a working model that will do what we're discussing here, I'm all 4 years. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to go with it immediately, but I think that's one of those things that is going to be on the horizon is that, as well as MLS relationships with our associations and how that is playing a part, because for most members in most markets that I work in, is the members are part of the association because they have to be to get access to the MLS. But if there's changes that are going to be detrimental to their business, that's another conversation to be had. How's that going to play out after the settlement, and the details. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's unfortunate that I didn't hear enough of that, I think, in this year's meeting, because there's a few things that are still spinning, but for us, I think as industry leaders, it's an opportunity to give support where it's needed, but also to see if there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to announce right now. I'm announcing SCARP, which is the Spencer Kroll Association of Realty Professionals. So I'd like to invite you to be the first member. Will.
Yeah, I have to look at your deck, and we can go from there. But yeah, there might be an opportunity there.
I love it. Thank you, Will. Where can any of the audience find you on social if they want to learn more about the DMV?
Just Will Wiard on any social media channel. So just my name, Will Wiard, on any of those channels.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you for being a guest on Own It, and we will see y'all on another episode.
Thank you, guys.
Catch us on the next episode where we're talking with Jeannie Irish, the powerhouse behind Costa Modern Properties and the soon-to-be 2025 president of NAREP San Diego. She's not just breaking into leadership, she's smashing down the barriers and unapologetically pushing for more Hispanic home ownership. From empowering agents to challenging the status quo, Jeannie's taking no prisoners and changing the game. Tune in next time and hear more.